your first 10 customers, you will have to claw, fight, scratch, steal to get the first 10. First 10 are the hardest, period. Then your next 100 will be as difficult as the first 10. That is absolutely the thing to overcome. And it is demoralizing to anybody involved when you're not making a paycheck, you're not doing this, to have no tangible levels of success. The revenue coming in the door is like the only scorecard that says you're on the right path. Everything else is you're hoping it is. That's the biggest hurdle for, I think, a successful startup.
I'm Garrett Wong, and this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you? Ray Hespen, welcome to my podcast.
Hey, thanks, Garrett. It is an absolute pleasure and a treat to be on here with you.
No, I am super stoked for this. We're both busy. We've been trying to get to do this for probably a year. And every time we see each other at conferences, it's kind of like, hey, we're going to grab a drink, and it never happens. So I get you for an hour here. So no, this is going to be great. So I think I'm going to take a little bit of a different path, but I want you to start with a really surfacey, high level sort of introduction of who you are. And then I want to kind of dig deep into the origin story, Ray Hespen.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. Well, buckle up, I guess. No, so a little bit about me. Property Meld is a software company, started in 2014, solve maintenance for property management companies nationally, internationally, actually. And then, been doing that for about 10 years, largest in the business. I think we're pretty proud that we're number one. But I think kind of like going back a little bit, before that, I always jest that I'm a mining engineer, which is the dumbest kind of engineer you can be and still be an engineer, which is great. There's very few other engineering degrees that are below it, but it was actually an amazing experience. And I actually spent a lot of time in operations helping solve in manufacturing operations. How do you deliver consistent quality, enhance safety at a lower cost? And so I actually was really fortunate before going into property management. I've had like 6 to 7 years of professional experience of doing nothing but working in a really bad economic environment, being forced to learn how to make things leaner and better using data and automation. So kind of some interesting paths there. And then before that, I'm a kid from Wyoming. So grew up in a little town called Gillette with one of my 5 siblings, with neither parent that went to college. And so I had actually an exceptional childhood as well. So it's my work backwards.
Okay, that I didn't know. I've always thought you as, I know you said farm kid, but have you lived in Wyoming before the move to South Dakota, or?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town called Gillette, really good blue collar city, heavily propped up around oil and gas. But then, after enough summers in the oil field, you realize that it is really hard work. And I was one of those lazy entrepreneurs that will work incessantly hard to not have to work later. Still waiting, but ended up going to school. Yeah, it's coming, right? It's almost there. I'm sure.
One day, Ray.
One day. So then I went to school, but then in South Dakota School of Mines. But then I was actually, I moved around a lot. I tell people, my wife and I got to date the country. And so I lived in California. I was in Tulsa. I was in the Chicago area. I was in the Baltimore area, and then Denver. And I basically kind of chased my company around I got a problem, and be like, what psychopath is willing to move out and try to help solve it? And I would just raise my hand about any instance I got. So I got to travel around a lot, live in a lot of places, meet a lot of amazing people. And then, I always loved Rapid, and I had a lot of friends who loved Rapid, never wanted to leave. And I'm like, you know what? I bet you we can have some amazing people work at a software company here. So it's kind of the antithesis of it.
Okay. Well, so mining engineer, why did you go into that of all things?
Oh my goodness. So Garrett, I will tell you, I had the big man upstairs watching out for me. I was in high school. I got accepted into West Point Military Academy, which is a pretty prestigious school.
Yes. Absolutely.
And but at the same time, I was just finding out about girls. Like, everybody's younger, but like when you find a girl and you're like, you know what, I'm going to just legitimately be, just going to legitimately give up everything I'm doing to stay with this girl. Like, so I was not planning on going to college. I was going to stay in the oil field. And I was like, this was my girl. I even moved out of my house senior year in high school. I moved out early because I was so convinced that this was it. So anyways, happenstance, my parents and I stayed at least on a good enough relationship where I was broke as all because I'd moved out. I'm paying my own way as a senior in high school and going to high school. And my parents would be like, hey, we'll buy you some clothes. And boy, was I not going to take them up on that. So we went to the mall that was nearby. And they had this great engineering exhibit where there was robotics, there was a concrete canoe, there was like these drones they were building, like all this cool engineering stuff. And I just gravitated. And I remember my dad was with me, and him and I, you move out, it's not like on great terms, but I was like, that looks really cool. And I just remember him just like, being like, let's go take a look. Like, just making me up, let's go look at this engineering stuff. Absolutely. Because, again, I'm some kid who's not going to do anything after high school, which oil field's great living, by the way. But anyways, I go over, I was like, I think I want it. My dad's like, hey, let's go check out this, this meeting. And so he was really great at helping me. And I'm like, I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. And then the guy at the university that I ultimately went with called me one day and he's like, hey, dude, do you know how much mining engineers make? And he's like, it's pretty much the same thing. It's the same amount of math, the same amount of this, but this part's different, this part's different. And so I ended up just getting talked into mining engineer by one guy, and forever thankful for him. But anyways, it was one conversation. I was like, sounds like a good idea. I'll go into mining then. That's that's as simple as that story is, but a lot of very fortunate events that basically led up to it.
Okay, so you are in manufacturing, you're traveling around the country. Tell me about the spark of Property Meld. Tell me how that happened.
I will say, Garrett, I am very much the guy, I think, who recognizes a good idea, but I don't always come up with them. And so there's people that come up with them, and there's people that know which ones are good. I am the latter. My co-founder, David Kingman, and I, we were always like, we even roomed together for a little bit during college. He was in the National Guard, so he was deployed twice. And so we kind of got to intercept ourselves a little bit, but we would always like jumble around things or opportunity or business ideas that we would want to do together. And we even evaluated a few of them together, like just starting fresh. But then one day he called me. I was in Baltimore at the time. He was in Albuquerque. And he's like, dude, has renting always been terrible for you when it comes to maintenance? Because I moved around a lot. And he was like, I'm having this experience. And I was like, it's bad enough that I'm handy enough that I would just rather fix it myself and not even say anything. And it was actually easier. And so that's when we started to evaluate. And then when I talked to about 25 different property management operators, I was like, oof, this is bad. And it kind of mirrored a lot what I learned in my professional career of manufacturing and operations. I was like, man, there's a lot of waste in here that we can do something with. And I'm very aware of what technology is capable of. And so that was the moment after having those conversations, there was enough of conviction built. I can't tell you which one, but there was a point where I was like, this is obvious. This is obvious. That has to be done.
All right. So there's got to be a better way. You find a need in the market. How do you start up from concept to hanging out a shingle? What does that look like?
Oh my goodness. Well, so this was our business plan. This is the OG one. I didn't come prepared for as a prop, but this is the 2014 pitch paper that I worked with my first investment meeting. This is the same alligator clip and everything. Like this is wow. This is museum worthy.
Got to get that bronzed.
Yeah, right. There's so much garbage in here. So much garbage. I mean, it's a good process to do it. I'm trying to remember. There's some financial modeling in here. There's like sensitivity analysis, all trash, totally garbage, way off. The most valuable thing that we had built is we got to understand the process really well, and we could map out where the friction points were and which ones had human interactions and which ones we could have not have human interactions. And so that's like, we almost spent all of our time like trying to understand the business so well that it then became, are you able to build technology well enough to do the thing, was the only question. It wasn't like, would it be valuable? Could it be solved? So that was kind of the first part of doing it. So interviewed a ton of customers, understood their process really well, mapped it out. And they were like, all we got to do is solve these points right here. And it's worth a lot of money for customers to do that. Okay.
So you had it in your mind already to have a software platform to solve this rather than some of the other types of things that are out there?
I think that was my co-founder sitting there saying that. Like, and again, the very nice thing about property management, it tends to be a little bit of a laggard in the consumer experience, right? Like, we get great consumer experiences oftentimes, like ordering pizza or getting an Uber or a Lyft or ordering something from Walmart or Amazon. And so when that's getting shoved in your face, it's very easy to paint a contrast to the experience that we were experiencing as renters and going like, clearly technology has solved this for other vertices. And so it wasn't a hard leap to think like that could be solved there too, right? And so the general answer is to yes. And then, so it wasn't like we were inventing anything new as much like figuring out how to do it right.
Are you, like you mentioned, funding and things like that, were you guys savvy enough right out of the gate to think about we need to fund this as a startup, or were you trying to just program it on your own on the weekends?
Both. Yes. I will tell you, there was an interesting part. So Garrett, when I was my last job in manufacturing, I was a plant manager of a $36 million a year operating budget business, had a team. I was actually responsible for the turnaround. I had an amazing boss, but was responsible for the turnaround of that group. I had my own executive assistant, like all that was good. And then to go and just have conversations with people and being like, hey, I would like to raise money. I was seen as a very high performer in my org. And then I went out in like the more conventional paths to raise money. And I definitely got my teeth kicked in a bit, like not from a couldn't get any money, but two, like nobody here thinks I'm special. Everyone at my last company thought I was special and really good at what I did. Nobody thinks I'm very special. So why aren't they? Like, it was almost kind of that rude awakening. And there was one gentleman, I remember he said it, which I actually thank him because it was very needed for me. He said, hey man, I'm going to shoot you straight. With your background and your degree, no one's going to give you money. Straight up told me it. And I needed him. I needed him to rest right on my shoulder right here. But I was kind of sitting there going like, this is not going to be as glamorous as like, I saw, at that time, Silicon Valley wasn't out, but you had at least heard things where so-and-so go raise a ton of money and it's like, go write him a check. I was sitting there going like, this is going to be a slog. So I then kind of abandoned the concept of fundraising, the sexy kind of fundraising where you get the big term sheet and you celebrate and you pop champagne. And I did the ground and pound, friends and family, find out anybody that would be willing to give me money. And ended up raising, I think the first tranche was around 150 grand between three investors. So far less sexy than what you get to see on TV.
So a lot of that, is it towards, let's talk about the nuts and bolts. I mean, I've actually, we can talk about this offline, but I'm trying to do a bit of a startup myself in the property management space. And the nuts and bolts of that initial fund, like where does that money go? I mean, salaries of a programmer, R&D.
Well, let me pull out my really detailed R&D, really detailed financial model. You have some ideas. One, you are overly idealistic. which is actually a prerequisite for an entrepreneur to even begin. Not even a successful one, probably a successful one too, but like even to start, you have to be blindly optimistic for whatever reason. So I assumed that we were just going to get some. So we ended up buying development space, hosting, brought on another developer. We paid hosting costs and even dallied in us a couple of salespeople at the time, which were unsuccessful. But the goal was to just get money to build the product more, and then I was going to sell it, or me and one other person. And so, admittedly, the money just went purely for R&D, and I was the lone sales guy, onboarding, support, all that together. But it was just the app.
You could name one problem in that first year that was staring you in the face. What would you think that would be the biggest challenge you had to overcome?
Getting the first 10 customers. Okay. It took us, Garrett, it took us probably a legit 2 years to get one paying customer, or like the semblance of. As a matter of fact, I remember names. Like that's how big they were. And there was a gentleman, his name is John Harms, really nice guy. He was fortunate enough when I was living in Baltimore. I think he was in Parsippany, New Jersey. I think I'm getting the city right, in the old Staples headquarters, software company up there. And he was kind enough to give me some insight. He said, your first 10 customers, you will have to claw, fight, scratch, steal to get the first 10. First 10 are the hardest, period. But he said, then your next 100 will be as difficult as the first 10. And so that is absolutely like the thing to overcome. And it is demoralizing to anybody involved when you're not making a paycheck, you're not doing this, to have no like tangible levels of success. The revenue coming in the door is like the only scorecard that says you're on the right path. Like really, everything else is you're hoping it is. And so that was the one that, I don't think comes easy to anybody, but it's also the thing, if you can get over, is probably, that's the biggest hurdle for, I think, a successful startup.
I'm thinking of, I'm going to ask like an early script. How are you even selling customer number one on a brand new software that basically doesn't have any customers yet? Is it promises? Is it potential?
Oh man. Well, number one, when you're the founder, everybody's buying your new vision. Like, sure. But I would say like we went through a lot of iterations because you have to find what works. And I think that's the important thing. One, about proximity. If you want to do a startup, I don't know how people in sales teams do them remotely. No idea. Because you're going through iterations so quickly on like what's not working, yet you can't include one failure indicates not working. So you have to do a bunch of reps and keep like slightly iterating the message. So for us, like we were very focused on maintenance. Well, every single one of these providers was using a property management software that had a work order module. So first pitch, I was like, property management software. Nope. Everybody's like, I'm happy with this one currently. Then I would be property maintenance software. And then I'd be like, I'm too busy. I don't got time for this. Then I'd be like, it's bolt-on. Yeah, that nobody cares. Like I've already got a thing that does it. And so lastly, arrived to exceptionally good consultant level discovery. So I would just have questions for them and ask them what was happening and what was happening in these parts of the process. And by that, they would sit there and be like, ooh, I don't like that in my own business. Ooh, I don't. And so then I wouldn't have to sell software at all. I would just sit there and go, let me learn about you, your business. Oh, by the way, it turns out if you've got some real meaningful problems, do you want those to go away? Then let's have a conversation. And so that was probably the biggest thing that when I started to learn how to do that, that was when everything took off. When I helped prospects see the own challenges in their own organization that they didn't know they had, then that was when we really took off.
It's brilliant because you're not selling. You are communicating, creating a relationship, as all people in I don't want to call it sales because I think sales is everywhere. I think really what we're in is the service and the people business, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
about sales. And yeah, just doing those deep dive investigations. I do the exact same thing in our property management business.
Mm.
So, okay. I remember going to a software conference and I had already committed to this one vendor. And then I went around the corner. I think I've told you this. And I think they had, I'm not going to mention the software, it doesn't really matter. 1,500 to 2,000 attendees at this thing is pretty big. And you come out of the main auditorium and you've got all your vendors there and they've got all the great spots. So of course I'm being wooed and I sign up for this, that, whatever. And I go around, I'm trying to find the washroom. And I probably had to go down 2 hallways. And there's this one table right in front of the men's washroom. And there's this guy there, Ray, standing in front of this table in the absolute worst spot. But you know what? I was intrigued because the visuals of what you were saying about the communication, I just remember going, yeah, this makes sense. Like all the other software that I was there looked like almost like CB radio traffic, and yours was elegant. It looked like iPhone chat bubbles. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh man. So I remember the conference too, Garrett, by the way. Um, that was actually the first time we had actually gotten enough customers that particular software provider had actually opened up to a marketplace. I actually think, let's give them credit. Rent Manager was one of the first ones in our particular space that said, hey, we should make these best in breeds be able to plug into our system. And that was actually relatively novel at the time. They were definitely a leader in that. And so not only were we sitting there like trying to sell wares, but we had a great answer now. It integrates. Oh boy. I was like, I'll go to all the revenues. It's so much easier to have that conversation. It integrates. But I'll say, though, it's kind of interesting for a long while. You just end up having to just go and like learn, like, what is the messaging that works? So just like you called out, Gary, I probably knew nothing about the chat bubbles driving it. I was just like, I need to know who these people are. I need to meet with them. And then you get a test messaging and then find out what's getting further. You understand what your product does, but it's like how you get them there. Like I was able to rapid fire in conversation or even like do some live demos there. And you could almost see what was resonating and which wasn't. And then you'd be like, well, why is that not resonating? That's like the coolest thing that it does. And then you get to just keep being iterative. And I feel like that's like, apart from the awesome opportunity, Garrett, of pulling in our first customer in Canada, you don't have to give them all the war stories of how brutal it was being such an early customer. But I think the thing as an entrepreneur founder is like the speed at which you get to the right message or the speed at which you get to the right product. The faster you can do it, the greater likelihood of success, because your brain can only take you through the desert so long before you quit. So you have to be fast. And that's what I loved about events like that. I'd be like, I eventually was just keep getting better and better and better. I was getting more conversations, more demos, more sales. And yeah, like people very undervalue the reps that are necessary to get a product to a place where you can sell it.
Yeah, the Rent Manager conference. I remember actually, I was actually feeling sorry for you, thinking this poor guy must have signed up really late. They stuck him in front of the washroom. And honestly, that's why I came over. And yeah, audience, I was customer number 1 in Canada. It actually, Ray, it wasn't that bad. I mean, I remember having a conversation that you had the tenants and the tenant communication part out, but not necessarily, and with the tenant and the vendors, but not necessarily the owners. And you had said, well, you know what? I think we can build that by like Q3 or Q4 of next year. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you can do that and kind of be responsive to us, then I'm in. And what you're just saying there about people coming in and you adapting on the fly almost is, I think, really echoing like Property Meld's core belief and just adapting to what the customer wants and needs, not necessarily trying to force them to like your product because of what it does. Would you agree with that?
I'll go 50-50 with you on the agreement of it. Here's one of the things, and Garrett has some pretty big fingerprints on some of the product. But the reason, Garrett, that you do, and uniquely you do, you've got your survivalship bias on like your input, and be like, oh, these people just listen to people, and we have a core value in our company, and it's loyalty to customers, which sounds super cheesy, but we've got a kind of like a short blurb after that really describes to our team members what it means to be loyal. Is the customer is not always right, but their problem is always real. And so if you look at it on that mindset, and you can sit there and go, but what are they experiencing? They might have their own solution to it. It may be the right one, it may not be. But a lot of the times we'd end up finding customers who understood their problem and the solution together really well. And they knew why it was impacting them. They knew what it could do, and they knew what technology. So you ended up, as long as the customer solution or idea of a solution matched, or they were bought into that concept, it feels like a very two-way system. I will say, actually, early on, if we would have, I remember on all those 25 customer discovery calls, like at the beginning of the company, I would ask questions like, what do you think would make it better? And a lot of the answers were like, well, if I just had one more field to do X, or a checkbox that would help me do what? And I'm sitting there thinking like, well, why do you want that? Well, it's to track this. Well, what's happening there? That. And so I would bypass the checkbox or the textbook, the text block, because that was a very inefficient way that required human beings. Like, can we just get rid of that? Can solve their problem? And so that's one of the things I think for us, like, and why I'm such I would say I'm probably too in the weeds in this business, not from Property Meld, but I love property maintenance, because if I understand it so incessantly well, I can take data points from very intelligent customers and I can go, that one will make a huge impact in their business. Then that's kind of where that symbiotic relationship works out so incredibly well. And I think, Garrett, you were a technology guy at the time. You clearly had some technology chops. You're like, you could probably do this. Why couldn't you do that? That would actually save X. And be like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's actually a really good idea. David, just a couple lines of code, right?
Yeah.
No, but let's get that thing done. So.
No, I'm going to paraphrase what you just said there, because I say this to my staff all the time. And again, being in traditional property management, I'm going to just come out and say it. It's awful, right? Like, we are squarely between an owner that might want something that's completely different from a tenant. And sometimes, property managers that come up to me and they're just like, man, this client, they just don't get it. It's just so simple. I don't understand why they're complaining about it. And to paraphrase you, Ray, I mean, I tell them, like, it doesn't matter how little of a problem that we think it is or how quickly we can solve it. It bothers them, and that's one of their little buttons, and it's our duty to solve it, no matter how insignificant we think that problem might be.
Yeah, I think, if anybody's starting a new business, figure out the best way to solve it. That's really the game, and learn all the problems. Like, even when you're talking about that angry, upset owner, like, well, it's that one thing. And if you were to understand why that one thing bothers them so much, like, oh, I get it. And because I'm not in your world, I'm not sitting there thinking about that mortgage payment I got to make with that rent money that's not coming in because for whatever reason. You're like, I see now. Is there any way that we can help solve this in our business that even prevents that feeling or that whatever? And so you have to really go understand them and why they feel a certain way or what's causing it, because you're right. It should be a data point that says they don't like it, can't solve all the problems. But if you hear enough of them and go, it's a big problem or we lose investors because of X, Y, and Z, it's like, that's the one that, we should as a business find out exactly why and know it incessantly well and educate our team on why it bothers them and then go solve it. But yeah, we're saying the same thing, but yeah.
No, it's amazing. I think that's absolutely the key to business in general. Speak to me about scaling, but more specifically, can you recall over the last 10 years, was the scaling of Property Meld very structured? Was it instinctual? Like, from hiring to, okay, now we got to get another round of funding. Give me the details on that.
Okay. Well, we don't have that much time, but I will tell you, just like we were kind of in the green room a little bit earlier, I am convinced there's absolutely no way to learn certain lessons without legitimately going through the desert in those scenarios. And so I'll give you an example of the first one. Apart from learning how to sell, I was not a good salesperson from a truly consultative approach until, you got a proverbial gun to your head of people relying on you and there's no sales coming in. It's like you have to learn how to sell, and you have to learn how to be a consultant, and you have to learn how to be a good onboarder, and you have to learn how to do all these things. So there's some moments where you're like, I've got to learn this thing. Then there are like major gaps where you have to learn something big. And I remember there was a point, and it's obnoxious. Like, I don't think I could have stood myself, Garrett. Like, if I would have talked to myself in 2019, I'd be like, this prick, like, he is too much. But in 2019, I felt I knew a lot more than I did. I was like, this being a CEO is pretty easy. We grew from 4 to 17 people, 17 to 35 at that time. And it's like, now I was burning money like crazy. But the thing that I was learning is, like, as we were scaling, there was something happening where my time and my calendar became full. And as soon as that happened, and I was not able to jump in and help with certain scenarios, give very specific advice to very specific things just started to break. The growth just kind of went and then just hit. It was almost as if it hit me when I was not available to, like, help get a deal across the line or help with an onboarding and challenge, help with whatever. And so 2019, I had to learn, one, I don't have it all figured out, but two, a big reason is because I didn't know how to really to manage managers or manage with more autonomy, people development. I wasn't doing any of it. I was just telling people what to do. That took a good solid, probably a year and a half of getting my ass absolutely handed to me. That I was spending a lot of money and I was getting very little traction. And it took that long to figure out what my problem was and come up with something to rectify and leave a whole bunch of amazing employees. We've had amazing employees. But it left a whole lot of pain, scars, corpses, like, going through that. So no, not been very linear. It's almost like it hops in until you find that next major lesson you need to do and you plateau. And until you figure out that lesson, then you can start going up, and then you plateau again. And when you do that, then you plateau. So it's almost like there's weird milestones I think a lot of people have to go through that haven't done this before. You almost have to, like, go through some really painful organizational challenge because one of the leaders, has just not cracked the code yet on how to do that well.
That is really fascinating because over my, I'm going to say, what is it now, July, 8-month journey since I had to make some very real changes in our organization. I started working with Brandon and Natalie Dawson out of Cardone Ventures, and he actually talks and speaks about what he calls breakpoints. And, you might be at $1 million now, you might be at 3 million gross revenue. He said there's a break point at $1 million. There's another one at 3. I think he said another one at 10, another one at 35 to 40, where you think everything is going great. And then the business, if you're not prepared for it, like you said, you could call it a plateau, like things are just going to break and explode on you. And if you're not going to react to them or be prepared for them, in his case, he's trying to prepare us for those. So it sounds like that is a very real and consistent thing in all businesses as they scale.
And I will at least say in software, it's actually the more I've learned about it, the more the areas are very common, those break points. I like those. Or did you say break points or brick?
Break
points. Okay. Yeah. I liked break point for some reason, but I'll go with break points. But those break points happen at very specific revenue numbers, and people can go, well, that's when you go from founder-led sales organization, like you have to find a way to get out of founder-led sales organization. That's how you move from this to this. Well, then once you get there, you have to have, leadership structure that really incentivizes autonomy and organizational development. And then you go here. It's very super common. And so break points, I like that.
Yeah, break points, C-suite type stuff, when you get to certain, tens of millions of dollars. Speaking of that, just popped into my head. finance wise, obviously, I'm not going to say how important it is for you to be on your finances, but how early on did you guys discover that you needed to be in touch with finance? And was that one of your first major hires as you guys were expanding?
No, I will tell you no. One of the great benefits, I think a lot of people think they need to be an entrepreneur right out of college because Mark Zuckerberg did it. But the reality is, professional world and your career can teach you a ton of things. So I was in the cement business, graduated 2009. And for those that remember, that was really not a fun time. And it was definitely not a fun time to be in construction materials. So my next 6 or 7 years, like not only figuring out how to operate under very scarce resources, but then too, like, especially my last 2 gigs, I had an amazing boss that held the line really hard financially. And so I had to learn budgeting and finance and predictioning and forecasting very well. At least enough, I would say, and in hindsight, at least enough at that point that I could manage books and understand, and I knew our budgets and I knew when we were in trouble. And so it wasn't probably until about 2 years ago that became a more formal team and process and handed off me. So I had it for what was 7 years. And so I would say the number one thing that can kill a company, the number one thing is you run out of cash. It's the only thing that can kill a company. And so for as many fundraising rounds I did and had to, I was very keenly aware of how much money I had coming in and where it was going out and how it was going out. And so I, as much as it probably should have maybe hired somebody, I actually thought it was really healthy for me to be that in tune for a long duration. There was a point where it became, I could have definitely pulled somebody in faster, hindsight.
Okay. But as CEO now, how often are you reading reports or looking at the numbers?
Financials. Usually just when we have our books finished. We've gotten to the point where it's relatively predictable. Like there's a lot of leading things that I look at weekly. And then the lagging is, here's your P&L that's been finalized, done all the gap stuff. And so we review that once a month. So I see a lot of leading indicators for income on a weekly basis. And then I get to see the lagging, which is revenue and expenses on a monthly basis. So and then of course, quarterly with the board, reviewing that as well.
Okay. Let's transition into people. This is my favorite topic because, as most of my listeners know, I also had a bit of some people challenges, had to let go some key members in the company and eventually learned that, you have to look in the mirror and really I had to realize it was my leadership. What lessons can you tell our audience about leadership in the company and finding really great people and empowering them to really do the best for them and your company?
So you've heard of mission statements and core values. Yep. I was in a corporate organization. I couldn't even tell you what it was. It was like the most word salad vomit I've ever heard. And it was like somebody came in and be like, we need to include everything that we're doing into these 2 sentences. And it was just terrible. But I was chatting with a guy, he actually is in South Dakota, an amazing success story as an entrepreneur. His name's Eric. And the core value thing I've realized is really big. You can get away with it for a while early on of not having aligned core values. But when you start to get to any organizational size, it's almost like your operating systems that know how to speak the same language. The operating system receives particular instructions well. The operating system receives certain instructions very poorly. And there's something beautiful about all being on the same page. So I remember one of them was this concept of core values. And he asked it as simple as this. He's like, have you ever seen somebody do something that was technically not wrong, but pissed you off? And I was thinking about a time where we had a customer that was really had a hard time with something happening, something with their account, and had a team member that was kind of in charge of it, like, hey, 5:00, I gotta go. It's like, I get it. That is what you need to do, but this customer needs help. And it would roil my blood. And it was like there was nothing wrong. And then once you find enough of those, you realize they're actually core values. So there's nothing worse than trying to talk to a team member that thinks they have it all figured out all the time. The worst. like for us as a company. So one of our core values is humility, having white belt mentality. And it goes very poorly if you have somebody who does not have humility in our organization, every direction. The odd thing about it, most people think they have it, but there's real humility, and it's hard to have that as a human. The other one is loyalty to the customers. Talked about that. Like you have to be obsessed with learning about it. And so we got these core values really lined up, and then we're sitting there going, we were saying these were important, but we weren't hiring for them. Like not really.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're just getting mad saying these are important, and people are being like, well, they're not adhering to the core values, and people don't know how to interact as efficiently because they don't have the same aligned core values. And so all of that being said, and we still battle with it. Like we've had something that didn't work out, and I'd say we don't have a ton of like core value issues, but there's times you do and be like, well, did we go and evaluate that? And it's like, no, we didn't. And so getting everybody to operate on a similar aspect of core values like makes the machine operate so much better because they all value the same thing. You don't have to sit there and go, are you going to take care of that customer? Everybody knows you just take care of the customer then. Like, and if you can't because you got to go to a kid thing, let me help you because I know how important that is. Like, it's just amazing how it does. Or if like we want to build product and someone's like, I think we should do this. Have you ever talked to customers? No. How on earth can you have loyalty then? You can't. And it will make somebody flip out on like, that's like you haven't even talked to customers. How on earth can you generate product to help solve their problems? And so like you get everybody kind of operating on the same wavelength and that just, it's so much faster. Everybody just has a better inkling of knowing what to do, and the amount of conflict significantly comes down. I would say we have plenty of healthy conflict at our organization, but it helps a lot of unnecessary stuff go away.
You know, this is becoming a really great interview because of what I'm going through again, the whole hiring thing. We're in a bit of a hiring frenzy right now, but we have to take our time. And through our work, again, with Brandon and Natalie, one of the things that they're having us do is almost like a 4-part interview, which seems so arduous and so slow. And the first part is what they call a cultural fit interview. Then you go into a technical interview. But the third part, Ray, is we actually have the candidate look up our core values, which we publish on our careers page on our website, and they have to do a 5-minute presentation of how their work, not themselves, because anybody can go, oh yeah, I'm transparent, how their work has demonstrated alignment with those core values. And I'm telling you, it's a game changer. Like the 3 people that we have, like Zach is our video content editor. He just started 3 weeks ago. He's probably going to be listening to this going, why did you say my name when I'm editing the podcast? But no, like as the first hire under this new process, like off the charts compared to your 20-minute interview. Hey, when can you start? You check a reference, and then 6 months later, you find out that they're just not a fit, right? So you're saying everything you're saying is really aligning with what I'm learning right now.
Well, I'm going to have to take inspiration because I don't steal ideas. I take inspiration. I'm going to have to take inspiration from that one because we're trying to figure out how to get better. And not only that, like people like, it's not that some core values are right and some are wrong. Like that's not it. It's that you just want them similar. Because, and so it actually helps the incoming employee as well know, like, no, these are my people, or this is the thing I was running away from, and I feel better about being here because it aligns. Or sit there and go, you know, they care about this stuff. I could give a rat's whatever about this stuff. This isn't important to me, but these things over here are. And boy, like everybody avoids a bad time. But I might have to take inspiration from your They have to build a presentation and present to you how their work, not themselves, demonstrates that.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm giving credit to the Dawsons because I'm not coming up with this stuff, but I think the lesson there is also don't like look above you, right? When you're trying to learn, nothing wrong with looking left and right. But I mean, if you got a work partner or another business that's at the exact same level as you, how on earth are they going to give you the answers to get there other than just shooting the you-know-what and trying to, throw whatever lands on the wall? No, you have to look up and kind of follow somebody, mentor, whatever you want to call it, on how they made it through what you're trying to go through.
So that's really great. Like an 18-year-old Ray and 19-year-old Ray had probably been like, honestly, smarter than the people up. That's what was so annoying about it, is I almost had to have that humility baseball bat hit me in the head and realize I really need to learn some things, and then go, are there less painful ways? Are there less painful ways, please? And that's when you start sitting there going like, all right, these people know. I'm going to ask them questions. I'm not going to educate them on what I know. I need to learn from you. What is it? So,
yeah, if there's any aspiring entrepreneurs out there, take a lesson from Garrett and Ray. Like, pain is a good teacher. And we said this in the green room, but how long are you going to be in that pain state before you actually take your head out of your butt and start learning and changing, right?
I will tell you, so I actually wrote about this. I had an amazing team member here that went through she called it the desert. And there's such a profound concept to this idea of the desert, of like, it's this thing you have to go through sometimes to learn something, because our own ego protects us, our own, like, the thing doesn't become the most important until it's the most important, and it's got to be bad. It's pain. And then that's when you start to learn, like you said. But I have become so fond and keen. And that's one of the things I try to understand from people, is who can go through those long deserts. And some people would call it the fear zone, whatever. But where a lot of people duck out and they leave, and it's not me, it's this, or my exteriors, or my whatever, or my boss, whatever. It's like, when you realize the simple truth of that, like, true personal and professional development requires pain, then you sit there and go, there are going to be very painful journeys that some will just not be able to get through. They just won't. And so who's got that weird stomach that can make it through that desert? And that's really hard. And it's really hard to realize and accept as a truth, but I don't actually think there's shortcuts. I've met way too many smart people that have done some amazing things, and the amount of deserts they've been through is incredible. And you have to learn how to have the stomach to go through a desert. And then once you're on the other side of it and you realize the positive nature of the desert, then you can also recognize when you're in a desert again and be like, this is just a desert. I know I'm in my spot. What is it I need to learn from this? What is it I need to walk out with? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing if you recognize it for what it's worth.
I love that analogy. I love that. Culture. We're talking about people. We're talking about engagement. You have that first hire, but that's not enough, because I believe if you don't have proper people culture, people get disengaged. I think the average younger person under 40 is already preconditioned to leave jobs after 2 or 3 years. And as you know, as both of us being company owners, that's not doing anybody any favors. Give me your thoughts on company culture and how you foster that sense.
So it works out. So we had to pick a people strategy. So our people strategy was hire early and develop. So we probably have, like, we haven't had like the best track record. Like, we don't have the kind of company that's like, oh, I've come here and we've got all of our OGs and here they are. They've all got a ton of tenure. We've got some key members that have been here for a while, and then we've learned our lessons as an organization. But one of those things is that humility core value is a big deal. People can develop if they recognize themselves as needing to have a white belt mentality, period. So that's one. And then two, it's about almost repeating something incessantly until people start believing it. I was having a conversation with, I forget, it was a friend or something. It was with a friend. And I was sitting there going like, the problem is societally, we're telling people shorter and shorter time spans. Whatever it is, right? Shorter and shorter. And so the problem is the market, the school system, nobody has like gotten people to think longer term. It's actually been shorter and shorter, right? You think about people and counting on Social Security, pensions are gone. There's literally nothing that makes somebody think longer. And so what I've tended to really take a hill on is actually trying to do my best to repeat. Pain is a beautiful thing. But then two, like, you need to start getting an idea of what you want to do longer term. And that's actually really hard. It's really hard to have somebody who is in their moment. The only way that they can feel if something's good or bad is in the moment Does this make me feel good or does it not? And then what happens is they sit there and go, I don't feel good right now. They don't understand the destination they're going. They don't understand they're in a desert. Nobody's pushing them. And they go, this feels bad. I bet if I go over here, it's all going to fix. I bet you they don't have that bad stuff. And so then they go over here and then they get hit with all the negatives after 6 months, after the newness wears off. Now they're negative. Oh, well, that one, different negatives, yada, yada. So you kind of have this repeat cycle. Well, the problem with those individuals is they will go through and lose so much time in transitioning, but then addition to, they don't have the opportunity to learn mastery. And so long-term, they're going to very much suffer as professionals. They just will. And so the thing that I've been focusing on is getting a really crisp and clear picture about what they might want to do in 5 years or some veins of it. And that way, when you're talking to them and sitting there going, like, I hate this thing, I'm feeling this negative, then you can sit there and go, that's actually completely normal because you're bad at that thing and you just need to get better because that's the only way you're going to get to the thing you want. And so now they're not changing that this is bad, but they're actually going like, this is painful, but good. And I think that's the thing our society, all the way up until their first job or first professional job, second professional job, whatever, doesn't help do. And unless you intercept that line of thinking, it's just really hard to do anything about it. So anyways.
No, I'm going to, again, Brandon and Natalie, one of the things that we're working on now is what they call PPFs, personal, professional, financial goals. You're just paraphrasing it a little bit differently, but I like that you're already on this path. And so now at around the 1 month mark of a new person being in our company, I will have an interview with them. I'll introduce what I want for my organization. We want to reach $100 million in, let's say, 10 years. And then I need to know what they want, personal, professional, financially, right? Some might say that's a little bit too invasive, but really it's not in my mind, because you need to know what the end zone looks like in your own life, whether it's 5 or 10 years, because it's not about taking X job or in this department or that department or in that company. If you want to be, again, in a bigger house with a different career, whatever it might be, traveling for a living, you need to know how to get there. And if that company can provide you a pathway by which to get there, then they will stick around as long as you're constantly communicating that and being transparent about it.
I will tell you, I love that, the PPF. I would say it's the only tool that I've found to be successful to legitimately push people hard. And if you can push people hard, then they can grow really quickly. I mean, I was very fortunate. I had 2 amazing bosses before Property Meld that were just like pushed me up to the line, and then they would like hold it basically. And you don't realize what a gift that is until like you get older and you're like, oh my goodness, like that was such a gift. But it's the only thing that makes it about you as a person, and going through that challenge is for you. It's not for the company with the letterhead in. And you realize it's a you thing and it's a you opportunity. And so it makes the conversation so much better. People feel like you truly and legitimately want them to do great things. And it also helps, put people in perspective and marry up their expectations of what they're willing to do for it. Because that's the last thing. Of course, we'd all love 7-figure salaries and have the 8-figure homes and the 6-figure cars and all that. It's like, well, are you willing to work, 100 hours a week? Oh, no. I'm kind of big into the work-life balance thing. Yeah, totally. Then we probably just got to legitimately talk about this, because if you want this incredible 0.001% professional development plan, you got to also be able to do the things that are 0.001. And I just want to make sure that we understand what that means, because that'd be a very unmet expectation there.
Yeah, I have adapted a little speech from Brandon that I do at the end of the second interview. So that would be the cultural fit interview, where we're just asking like 6 questions. Number 1 being, what do you know about our company, right? Because if they're like, oh, I don't know, then they haven't done any research. But at the very end of that, I'm literally saying something that goes along like, I'm This is going to be a partnership. I'm investing in your growth personally, professionally, financially, because that is the best way that our company can grow and for your teammates if you come on here. And I just want to make sure that you understand that if I don't see you growing, that means you're not interested in growth, and I refuse to not grow. So therefore, the relationship, unfortunately, will be over if I don't see you investing in yourself. Like, it's all about that person wanting to push themselves and not just live for a paycheck and wait for the weekends to happen. And so in taking that step and being very transparent about that at the interview, then when you push later and say, I want the best for you, because again, from the Dawsons, businesses don't move people, people move the business, right? And if you can really get behind that saying, then you can get out of your own way and let your people really take your company to where it deserves to be, because they are the ones who are going to directly benefit.
Completely agree.
All right. Well, I'm just going to end off with two more questions. I know we've been here for about an hour. Looking back, what is, let's say, one milestone or achievement that you're most proud of in the last 9 years of Property Meld?
I'd say the thing that I'm most proud of is we have an organization that has grown some pretty incredible people in our industry. Like, we're a talent producing engine. And so there's been a lot of people that have launched out of our company into our industry, but there's some amazing leaders that have come up from very limited roles to have, they're going to do incredible things in the company. And the hard thing is I don't want to wish them away, but part of me is I'm really curious of what these people are going to go do, because they're just something special. And so that's the thing that I get really excited about thinking about.
Awesome. Okay. And final question. And I ask every guest this question, so I want to hear what you have to say. Ray Hespen, this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you?
Can I answer it in 3 parts?
Sure.
So there's 3 parts. One is, so the thing that I'll feel good and that I can be done whenever that time is. 1, the vision that we have for maintenance in the home that fixing itself is more obvious than not. So the industry's already gobbled it up. They're taking it. They're going to run with it. You're not the outlier anymore. That's 1, because that's what's going to make maintenance exceptional for a lot of people. 2 is the people of this company have a great financial outcome. We do employee shares and different things there. And I want people to sit there and go, apart from what I've learned and developed and grown and the kind of career I'm going to get to have after this, or if I choose to want to have, it's incredible, but I want it to be very meaningful. And then 3, we're in a kind of like you all, Garrett, is we're in a community that we very much care about. I want to, there's not a lot of software companies around. And so big thing for me is showing a lot of people outside this area, the kind of talented people that are here. And this is an investable place, and there's startups to be had here. That has also got to be obvious. And so those are the 3 things that I've kind of almost that's when I feel like I can back off the drive and let somebody else run. But that would be immense success for me personally.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ray. Again, it's been a long time coming. Truly enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise. Thanks, Garrett.
All right. Take care.